There's an old saying that goes, "When in Rome, do as the Romans do." In many situations we face in life, this approach to getting along with people through conformity is an excellent diplomatic methodology, especially when trying to work with non-traditional groups in unfamiliar settings. While this approach may be an excellent survival technique when it comes down to dealing with the affairs of the world, does it also apply when it comes down to legislating ministry? Paul admonished one of his pupils to preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all longsuffering and doctrine. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned into fables. And to another he says, as ministers, we are to encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it. That's Titus chapter 1, verse 8 through 10. In a world of compromise and negotiation, this fundamental stands out to the Christian lay minister, for it indicates that we should make a stand decisively on the side of truth when preaching the scriptures. Note, as ministers, we are to uphold a standard of veracity in our teachings despite what others may think. That's why our topic for the day is Overcoming Ministerial Groupthink on the program for preaching, where we believe in service through teaching, the Layman's Guidepost. Sometimes as laymen, with many powerful and influential preachers, each with their own dominant ministry, it may be tempting for us to maintain good standing by reflecting the values and habits and even the mannerisms of those who are better known than we. But is this healthy? Is this the way God desires for laymen to legislate their ministry? Or does God simply allow for us to settle into the mode of conforming to the religious groupthink of the day? Let's begin our talk today by defining what groupthink is. Groupthink can be defined as the practice of approaching problems or issues as matters that are best dealt with by consensus of the group rather than by individuals acting independently. In other words, conformity. Now, before I begin my criticism, I must admit that this state of mind, groupthink, naturally occurs as humans intermingle. There's nothing abnormal about it. In established groups, we tend to adjust and reflect the customs of the prevalent forces around us. Not recognizing the full import and effect of groupthink, we often associate this kind of peer pressure with the struggles of a preteen or high school student. But shockingly, this kind of peer pressure follows us from the schoolyard right into the church house. Yes, even in the church setting, we find ourselves pressured to do as the Romans do. Humans are inherently social beings, completely incapable of ignoring the tendency to calculate social risk. Hence, a certain ministerial groupthink easily becomes par for the course. This means that even if we are preachers, more than likely we've all found ourselves subject to different forms of groupthink. Ministers, especially lay preachers, are often the prime victims of groupthink. After all, we all have ideas that we must express in public worship settings. We have pastors that we often desire to please. We have a large audience of people looking at us and paying attention to our every word. And these very people will judge our personal spiritual experiences based on what we say in public. So it's hard to resist the urge to play it safe by simply echoing the sentiments of the pastor or your favorite satellite television preacher. We subconsciously believe that if the people have already accepted the prevailing Roman way, then in order for us to be accepted of them, we have to learn to speak fluent Latin. There are three types of groupthink commonly manifested amongst lay ministers: theological, verbal, and cultural. Let me briefly review each. Theological groupthink is when a minister cannot make an honest biblical assessment on theological concepts because they're too busy trying to reconcile them with what a pastor, a church, or denomination is currently teaching. In this situation, a minister may discover a truth that's not commonly emphasized and may find it difficult to embrace because teaching it might cause you to fall out of the good favor of the aforementioned parties. At this point, the lay minister closes his Bible and, in essence, closes his mind. The looming hand of religious peer pressure has pulled the plug on his spiritual and doctrinal curiosity. And then there's the next form of groupthink, verbal groupthink. In this complex, the lay minister is unable to explain what he believes without borrowing words and concepts from others. In this particular dilemma, it becomes difficult for one to enunciate his beliefs plainly without using borrowed abstract expressions from others. This system of belief is constrained and limited by a series of memorized lines and concepts. After that, there's not much else. The pulpit ministry becomes nothing but worn-out repetitions and platitudes, and no one has the courage to point it out, and he cannot see it himself. And then, the third kind of groupthink, cultural groupthink. Cultural groupthink is when you're too afraid to do anything different than those around you for fear of standing out. Remember, I'm not talking about at school or at work or in the community. I'm talking about church. It's sad to say, but we religious people can sometimes be needlessly intolerant and narrow when it comes down to dealing with someone else whose style and approach might be a little different than our own. Not only do we not appreciate such diversity, we have no problem making people feel awkward just for being different. Listen, ministerial groupthink is poisonous to lay ministry. It focuses on conformity over progress, tradition over reformation, and the status quo over spiritual maturity and needed development. So why is this trend so dangerous, you might ask? There are three main reasons why spiritual groupthink is poisonous to lay ministry. Reason number one, ministerial groupthink makes you spiritually disingenuous. It's not half as much an honest assessment of the teachings of the Bible as it is a cheap repetition of what others already think of it. This hampers the Bible study process and prejudices our ability to be honest with the scriptures. Number two, ministerial groupthink is psychologically disabling. It enslaves the mind of the preacher just as it enslaves the mind of the audience. The sense of wonder, exploration, and creativity that we should all possess as preachers is destroyed, and we all become cheap copies of an ancient relic. Number three, ministerial groupthink is also theologically disabling. It kills doctrinal thought development over time and stunts the church's spiritual growth. In this mentality, the preacher spends more time trying to make sure that new teachings are not bought into the church without realizing that God may have more diverse truths in need of being emphasized to his people. The shocking news is that thousands of lay preachers across the land are stuck in one of these forms of groupthink. They can't think without hearing the voice of their favorite preacher or even that of their pastor. When studying Bible texts and preparing their sermons, they are easily distracted by what everyone else is preaching and can't write a sermon without thinking about how the crowd is going to respond. And in this particular complex, if you heard one preacher, you've heard them all. The time has come for us to admit that there needs to be a revival of free thought amongst ministers. And if there's to be a revival in the lay ministry, we must all work together to break the bonds of ministerial groupthink. So exactly how do we break the psychological bonds of ministerial groupthink? Well, there are three things that we all need to do from time to time to stay in touch with our individual call from God and resist the gravitational pull of crowd pleasing and not become lost in our own ministry. Number one, reflect and identify your personal roots. properly assess the origin and cause of your obsession with conformity. Learn to be brutally honest with yourself about what the root of this kind of groupthink is. It is nothing more than a cup of be like Mike syndrome, a dash of crowd pleaser syndrome, and a scoop of your own personal comfort zone. When you mix all three of these ingredients together, you become a preacher just as all others with no distinctive characteristics and no distinctive message. Number 2, rest and reassess your purpose. You need to create facility for your personal psychological renewal. Create space for yourself to think, meditate, pray, reflect, and get in touch with your personal values and convictions about ministry. Your mind is probably so overwhelmed from your ministerial groupthink that you've lost yourself in your own ministry. So take a sabbatical from time to time so that you can reassess, because if you continue with your normal patterns, you will not have time to get back in touch with your personal call. And 3, reform and preserve your renewed state. Have the courage to decisively make personal reforms and preserve your new way of thinking. When you recognize that you're under the control of the aforelisted negative factors, in the name of God, develop the courage to decisively make all the needed changes for you to be true to your ministry and true to yourself. Make a deep-seated commitment to practice sincere, independent thinking. No more mimicry, no more faking, no more emulating, no more simulating, no more being a knockoff version of the pastor, no more obsessions with TB preachers, no more crowd pleasing, no more tradition keeping, no more trying to look and sound like others. Lay preachers, it's your time to come out. In order for this reform to work, this decision must be absolute and final in your mind. It's the only way you're going to see any results in your ministry. Furthermore, this decision will have to be important enough to you for you to defend it at all costs. You may not be the most popular preacher, but you'll be the most genuine and true to your own personal calling. What happens when you shake the bonds of ministerial groupthink? I can tell you this. A great weight is going to be taken off you, and you're going to feel free to practice your own ministry as God has called you to do so. Because of this, you'll be able to think and act more freely and more creatively. This is because you'll be free to think for yourself, and God will be free to develop your mind, because it's no longer distracted by all the tradition and mimicry required in religious groupthink. When you shake the chains of ministerial groupthink, your ministry will cease to be a cheap byproduct of your religious environment and will start the process of growing into what it was ordained to be by the one who called you. In closing, all I have to say is this: avoid the danger of falling into religious groupthink. This may mean turning off the TV, leaving a church, separating yourself from unappreciative friends, ignoring discouraging individuals, disappointing some, or losing popularity with superficial thinkers. Just do it anyway. You don't have to be the preacher everyone else wants you to be. All you have to be is the preacher that God wants you to be. And at the end of the day, when all is said and done, when the church services are over, when the accolades have ceased, that's all that's going to count. And that concludes our topic for today. Have you ever been subjugated to ministerial groupthink? Are you stuck in it right now? Feel free to elaborate if you wish in the comments section below, and maybe we can engage in some interesting dialogue. Hope you enjoyed the program today entitled Overcoming Ministerial Groupthink. I hope to see you next time. And for the Layman's Guideposts, I'm Thomas Hardy. If you enjoyed this program and you'd like to see more, subscribe to this page. Also, please remember to like this video and be sure to share this video with others who could use this information. Finally, you can request a copy of my training workbook, The Layman's Guide to Biblical Preaching, a 7-step plan. Just click on the link below. This indispensable tool will take you step by step through the process of writing each one of your sermons in a clear and easy to understand way. Learn the secret to delivering powerful sermons and lessons today. And as always, for the Layman's Guidepost, I'm Thomas Hardy.